Alright, the next set of presentations that we're going to be looking at will be for Module C, which will deal with graphing in two-dimensional space as well as linear equations in two variables. The first thing that we're going to review is just the rectangular coordinate system. In order to be able to complete this section, you want to understand how to plot and graph numbers on the number line. We will be extending that concept. Upon completing this presentation, you will be able to plot points in the rectangular coordinate system and identify the location of a point. So let's go through some vocabulary. When we talk about the rectangular coordinate system, the first thing we have is the origin. This is the point where the two perpendicular lines, known as axes, intersect. These two lines have special names. The x-axis is the horizontal line of reference. This is the one that goes from side to side. And the y-axis is the vertical line of reference, which goes up and down. These two lines divide the plane, or the flat surface, into four regions that we call quadrants. Starting in the upper right with quadrant 1, or Roman numeral 1, and from there we move counterclockwise to find the others. Quadrant 2 will be in the upper left, quadrant 3 will be in the lower left, and quadrant 4 will be in the lower right. All of our points that we are going to look at are known as ordered pairs. An ordered pair is a set of two numbers, x, y, that identifies the location of a point in the rectangular coordinate system. The reason that we call it an ordered pair is because order matters. The point 5, 2 is not the same as the point 2, 5. So let's go ahead and identify these key features on this particular figure. So the first thing we want is the origin. Remember that the origin is where these 2 points, or where these two lines intersect. And so our origin is right in the very middle. We have our x-axis is the one that runs side to side. Our y-axis is the one that runs up and down. From there we have our quadrants. Our first quadrant is in the upper right. And remember that we want to go counterclockwise. So we get quadrant 2 is in the upper left. Quadrant 3 is in the lower left. And quadrant 4 is in the lower right. If you struggle with Roman numerals, then just use regular numerals. Remember that VI is not a quadrant, it's a coffee house. So make sure that you identify these correctly. VI is the Roman numeral 6. There is no quadrant 6. So the next thing we want to do, now that we know what our rectangular coordinate system looks like, is we want to plot points. So remember that we have our ordered pair, and our ordered pair is always x, y. So in order to plot a point in the rectangular coordinate system, we want to start by moving x units to the right if the x-coordinate is positive, or x units to the left if the x-coordinate is negative. When we talk about the two lines that intersect, they are basically two number lines. So the x-axis is just like all the other number lines that we've been working with so far. Now once we have moved left or right, we want to move up or down. So from that spot, we want to move y units up if the y coordinate is positive, or y units down if the y coordinate is negative. Once we have arrived at the location indicated by the point or the ordered pair, we're going to do just like we did when we were talking about number lines. Remember, there were two things that I pointed out that we want to make sure we do. The first is plot the point using a dot. It's extremely important to put a dot on the paper rather than just pointing to empty space. The second thing we want to do is label the point with its ordered pair name or other identifier. If you don't want to use the ordered pair name, you can always label your points as A, B, C, D using letters or some other notation in order to make it clear that you know which one it is. So the next thing that we want to look at is plotting and labeling points. So we're going to do exactly what we mentioned in the previous slide. We're going to start by looking at our first coordinate. This tells us left or right and how far. The second one tells us how far up or down to go. Since our first number is negative, we want to move 3 spaces to the left. And since the second coordinate is positive, we're going to move 5 spaces up. So we will be somewhere right around here. So I'm going to go ahead and plot my point and label. Either label with the ordered pair -3, 5, or if you want, you can label it using letters. Since this is example A, I'm just going to label it as A. For example B, we want to move to the right 2 since it's positive, and we're going to go down 4 since it's negative. So we are going to end up 2 to the right, 4 down, somewhere right in here. So if we plot our point, we have about there. And we're going to label this. Again, you can either label it as 2, -4 in parentheses or B. The third example, we have 5, 0. So the first number tells me to go 5 to the right. Second number tells me I don't want to go up or down. So we're going to stay right on the line. Plotting our point, label, and we're done. For example D, we want to go 5 to the left and 2 down. So we'll be somewhere right in here. Plot, label. For the next example, E, the first thing it tells me is not to go left or right. Since this is a 0, I want to move 0 left or 0 right, which means don't move left or right. And the second one tells me that I want to go up 4. So from the origin, we're going to go up 4 and put our dot right on this vertical axis. So example E will be right here. We plot, we label. And our final example, we want to go 1 to the right and 6 up. So if we go 1 to the right and 6 up, here's 1 to the right, 6 up, will be right there. So that is example F. So now the next thing we want to do is identify the axis or quadrant that contains the point. So we have example A, recall was right here, And recall that this was quadrant 2. Remember that we had quadrant 1 on the upper right, and then we went counterclockwise. So A is in quadrant 2. And again, I don't care how you write this out, as long as you identify that it is a quadrant and the number. So you can write out Q, 2 is a Roman numeral. You can also write Q, 2, the number. It doesn't matter as long as I understand what you're talking about. Okay, B. Example B we had was over here, and recall that this is quadrant 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So, quadrant 4. Example C. Where is example C? It is on the line, which means that it is not in a quadrant. This is on an axis. And which axis is this? Well, remember that my horizontal one is my x-axis. This tells me my x values. And so we'll go ahead and label that as x-axis. For D, we are in quadrant 3. 1, 2, 3. Example E, we again are not in a quadrant, we are on a line, and so we are on the y-axis for this one. And finally, example F, we are in quadrant 1. And so that takes care of plotting points as well as identifying where they are. Now, later on, we will see this again. We will always be talking about plotting points. And the main thing to keep in mind is when plotting points, we always talk about left and right and then up and down. So when will we see this again? Throughout your math courses, you will be learning how to graph different equations. In order to graph lines, parabolas, and other shapes based off of equations, you will need to know how to plot points in the rectangular coordinate system. Also, throughout your math classes, you will need to be able to examine graphs and identify certain points or their individual coordinates. An application of this that you will see in your next math class is domain and range of a function, or the possible inputs and outputs of an equation, the possible x values, the possible y values. So hopefully this is just a review. When you're ready to move on to the next presentation, go ahead and move on to the next presentation. Finally, as part of your notes, answer the following questions. How confident are you with the material presented in this section? What from this section needs to be explained further? And how much more practice do you need to be comfortable with the topic?